For generations, vampires in cinema have fascinated us.
Michael, I'm in love with Michael from The Lost Boys.
Our intrigue never seems to die.
But I do love Blade. Blade was badass.
Whether they've entered our dreams,
there are these creatures that are so amazing and mysterious and so larger than life.
Have inspired our sense of style,
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I was obsessed with that.
Or even fueled our fantasies and desires.
They ooze sex appeal, so I think, yeah.
Make no mistake, they never go out of fashion.
The fantasy of being able to escape from reality, to have, you know, eternal life, to escape from the mundane world, I think that is very enticing to a lot of people.
In this documentary, we speak to various women from the entertainment industry in Australia.
If cannibals can exist until the present day, why can't vampires exist?
We will ask them about their opinions on vampires and the vampire genre based on their own experiences.
Very mysterious, very mystical, majestic. There's something about them that allures me and I feel very connected to them.
So sit back, relax, grab your garlic, a crucifix, and some holy water on standby as we talk to the Vampires Down Under. Miss Grand Australia, Kimberly Gundani.
I think it was when I was around 10, where I kind of started appreciating movies a lot more. I was transitioning from the Disney-esque. And the funny thing is, I never saw the Addams Family as part of that sort of conglomerate type. So I always thought it was more of a scary vampires and, oh, you're not supposed to watch that. And I started watching more vampire movies as I was getting older, after my dad took me to Jurassic Park, you know, and I had to dress up with like glasses on because I was too young to go. So that's when we started doing vampire movies and things like that. So that was, yeah, around about 10. A bit old, really, but.
Screenwriter Michelle Dowling.
I don't remember what age I was when I saw it, but it was The Lost Boys. And I know it was before I was 6, because I moved into a house when I was 6 and I knew I'd already seen it. And the way I got into discovering more about vampires and studying them was to go old school and go to the library, because the internet wasn't around then, because I'm old. And yeah, that was a bit of a sneaky thing to have to try and do, because you couldn't go on the internet at the library, especially it's primary school one, and it would be really weird if you were trying to find a vampire book at school. You need any help? No, I'm not looking for vampires or anything. I couldn't check them out of the library, so I had to like hide in a corner to try and study them up. And yeah, that's basically where it all started from. And I just, when I could go to the movies, try and watch a vampire movie, go to the video shop, try and get a video for it. It's basically where it all started from. It's where all my movies and horror started from, really.
Miss Sri Lanka Victoria, Angelina Jayaraja.
I was probably 7 or 8 years old. I watched an episode of Scooby-Doo back in the day, and I remember, I don't remember too much of the episode, but I remember there was a vampire character that was going around causing havoc, and the Scooby gang had to get together and figure out who it was. So that was the first time I'd ever heard of the term vampire, and I knew what a vampire was, and it was your typical with a cloak or a cape, the teeth, the white makeup and all that, and it turned out to be just another ordinary person, as it always does at the end of a Scooby TV show. But yeah, that was probably the first time I heard of the term a vampire, yeah.
Cosplay artist and actress, Sime Argento.
I think it would have to be when I was in high school, when I first watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It was the actual movie, so it would have been in the mid-90s, early 2000s, I think it was. That was the very first time that I remember I watched it over and over, and I realised, yeah, vampire, okay, I know what it is now, I know who it is. I actually was very, very fond of that movie. I think it was Kristen Swanson and Luke Perry and Donald Sutherland that was in the film. That was just a big, I just fell in love with that movie. I thought from there onwards, I knew exactly what vampire meant. I was a teenager, it was all happening. And then obviously later on, the TV show came on board. So yeah, it all continued from there. My love and passion for vampires all kind of carried on.
From the web series Flunk, actress Acacia Collins.
I actually asked my mum the answer to that question because I was like, I can't remember, surely she knows. And she said, I think the first time that you heard the word vampire was when you were born. She was like, because I told you the meaning of your name. And she named me after Acacia, the Queen of the Damned. When she was in high school, she was reading all the Anne Rice novels and she decided then that she wanted to name her first daughter Acacia after the vampire. So I guess that was the first time I really heard of it. I think the first time I was actually exposed to vampires, I was going through my mum and dad's bookshelf and I pulled out one of the Anne Rice novels and I saw my name in it and I was like, what's that? And I thought it was so interesting and I went and I asked her and she was like, yeah. So I think that was when I first heard the term vampire.
Starno's #1 actress, Holly Phillips.
It was when I grew up without a TV, so everything was books for me. So it was when my mum was reading me a bedtime story and she was reading this story that I loved, Meg and Mog. I don't know if you've heard of it. Some classic literature. But there was vampires, so Meg was a witch. I was really obsessed with witches when I was younger. So she was a witch and she had a cat, Mog, and they had lots of different kind of friends. And one of her friends was a vampire. Don't remember his name, but yeah, they would hang out and do all kinds of activities together. So I remember learning about vampires from good old Meg and Mog days.
Actress Jessica Borg.
From my mum, actually. She's a huge fan of horror films. So ever since I was a little kid, she would expose me to horror movies and made me watch them with her.
Model, presenter, and award-winning actress Trisha Davy-Shay.
So the first time I heard the term vampire, I think I've always been quite familiar with the term. So being Chinese growing up, there's a lot of Chinese movies about supernatural events, and there's always these evil sorcerers who'll raise the dead and they become these sort of undead vampires, but they sort of jump around, hop around, and you have to stop them with amulets with sacred writing and just slap them on the forehead. So I think I've always been quite familiar with the term vampires, and it wasn't until maybe when I was a bit older when the movie Interview with a Vampire came out, and that sort of created a different sort of vibe of the more romantic type of vampire.
You know what? I think I have. And I'm always the damsel in distress. I like that. I like being the, oh, save me kind of character. And I think it usually happens when I actually go and see a vampire movie and then I come back and I'm like, oh, and then you have a dream about it and you think, oh, how did that happen? It's like, obviously you just watched Queen of the Damned and who doesn't want to be Aaliyah? And she's no damsel either. She's actually a leader. So, you kind of go, maybe next Halloween I'm going to get a Queen of the Damned costume on after going to the gym.
Honestly, not that I can really think of. I've had a lot of dreams where I've been chased by Freddy Krueger just because he's my ultimate villain. And I always found it really odd that if I yelled the word cut, it was like I was in a scene and everything reset, so I got to be able to have space to run from him again, but I can never really think of a vampire one, to be honest.
I would like to say when I was a lot younger. I think I was in on that Twilight craze at the time, and obviously I had a bit of a... Well, actually I was more Team Jacob, but it was that whole supernatural thing, and I did find some of the vampires quite good looking. So yeah, you sometimes have little dreams about them.
Oh, many times. many times. It's interesting because I find them very dark, very mysterious, very mystical, majestic. There's something about them that allures me and I feel very connected to them. I don't know if it's the darkness side or if it's just, I don't know, like a spell or something. You feel like you're under them. I can't explain it, but they're very beautiful. A lot of people get scared and, oh, you know, vampires and the teeth and the horror, you know, but I don't know, I find them very, very, very dark, very bold. They're very strong. There's something about like an aura or an essence. It's their presence. I don't know, it lingers. It just, yeah, you feel very, I don't know, I feel very connected to it.
Have I ever had a dream about a vampire? I think tons. I have been so obsessed with Lestat from Anne Rice's novels. So when I was a teenager reading those books, he was like my dream man. So yeah, I think my brain was flooded with a lot of vampire-y type stuff. Definitely Lestat. I think I can't remember a specific dream, but I know I definitely wished that he was real. Probably dreamed about him coming into my room at night and turning me into a vampire. That was the ultimate fantasy, so.
You know what, I'm sure I have, like, nothing springs to mind right in this moment, but I have a lot of, the way I dream is very kind of warped, surreal images coming in and out, and sometimes it's just colours and flashing. I remember seeing a postcard once and it was such a weird experience because I thought, that is what my dreams look like. It was just really colourful kind of images smushed into kind of shapes. So I can't remember off the top of my head. I remember when I actually first watched Interview with the Vampire, it was around that time I was having lots of dreams about different kind of creatures, and I was really into Buffy, which I'm sure I'll talk about later, when I was younger as well. So in that kind of time, I think I was probably more dreaming about being a vampire slayer than kind of any vampires themselves.
So it depends on the term vampire. So if you're thinking of the term vampire as in what we sort of think of the, you know, with the fangs and drawing your blood, I probably wouldn't have, because unless, you know, maybe watching Interview with the Vampire and seeing Brad Pitt and just going, oh, so maybe that's a different kind of dream. So in terms of that kind of fantasy vampire, not so much. But in terms of a broader sense of the term vampire, so because blood is the physical element, and beyond that there is energy. So there are sort of energy vampires out there. So I've had intuitive dreams before about, say, certain people who might be draining my energy, and so it's just like a intuitive warning to maybe distance or cut that person out.
That's a hard one, because I think I would say that 3 separate categories of vampires. I do enjoy the comedy-esque vampire shows, and then you kind of go into the old Hollywood 1931 sort of, that I love that. I love the Dracula type, old school suave. They didn't do too much blood and gore, it was more story-based, and then there's kind of the Queen of the Damned getting into this sort of, you know, I have to give it a cop out and say Aaliyah is my favourite. I think that's when I really fell in love with, you know, the whole vampire-esque and gave it a new meaning. But old school Hollywood is also awesome.
I would actually probably have to say Celine from Underworld. That movie actually got me to write a story when I was in high school. We actually had a sequel. It was awful, but that was actually one of the first movies that got me to write anything horror, because I just really couldn't write horror when I was younger. And yeah, I thought Celine, she kicked ass. I liked the idea of the warrior vampire instead of having like the kind of the Bram Stoker. Granted, he's obviously Dracula's classic one, but having servants, I liked the fact that they were very, you know, they could look after themselves and they were very strong. Where I tend to find with the very old school vampires, they didn't seem as strong because they had like a day protector and stuff like that, where they just, you know, owned it and they did their own thing.
I've had a bit of a thought over this, because you've got your obvious Dracula. You see him all throughout literature, all throughout like Hollywood movies and things like that. But I think for me, I would have to say Lestat. Not obviously the obvious reasons. He's very handsome, he's very charismatic, he commands a room when he enters, he lives a life of debauchery, and he's obviously a very pivotal, very strong, main, you know, long-standing character within the realm of the vampire world. But I was thinking about this, and I think what draws me to Lestat the most is that he's very, in many ways, human. he's driven by the same desires and wants as humans. You know, he doesn't want to be alone, so he walks the earth as much as he enjoys himself, and he lives a life of debauchery. Deep down inside, he's lonely, and he's just looking for companionship. He's looking for a partner. And I think in that Hollywood movie, when Tom Cruise plays Lestat, he turns Brad Pitt, Louis, into his companion. So I think, yeah, Lestat for me, because in some ways I see him as very human and I can relate to him.
I'm gonna have to go with, and I've got quite a few, mind you, and this is a really difficult one, but I'm gonna have to go with Brad Pitt from Interview with the Vampire, Lewis. Lewis, yeah, 100%.
Oh, there's so many. Michael, I'm in love with Michael from The Lost Boys. Absolutely love him.
Oh, cool. So as I was just saying, I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I was obsessed with that as a teenager and then into my early 20s, and always loved the Slayer Fests. So my favourite vampire was Spike. I just loved Spike. So he was with the blonde hair, he was really nasty, and then they put a chip in his brain so he became unable to hurt anyone. So he was just so lovable, and like you kind of hated him but you loved him at the same time. And then, oh, he was so nice, the poor little thing. I just loved him. I just loved Spike because he was so funny, and I loved his kind of cool rock and roll kind of London vibe as well.
Oh, definitely Akasha, played by Aaliyah from Queen of the Damned. And I have a second favourite, that's Santaniko, played by Salma Hayek from Dusk Till Dawn.
Akasha is one of my favourites, and also definitely Blade because Wesley Snipes, you know, and all the martial arts, action, yeah.
Blade, Blade, Blade. How could I forget Blade? All of them, but the original is always the best. But I do love Blade. Blade was a badass, and I just enjoyed what he brought on set. And even now, you know, it's been a long time ago, but you go back and you watch what people were thinking and how they were doing things on set, and you know, all these rumors. But when it comes to the whole show and how they put it together, it was ahead of its time, I feel, you know. And I hear people saying, oh, you know, we haven't had black superheroes before, and I'm thinking, no, we have. We've had Blade. Blade was always there. So
I definitely have to say Lost Boys. I have to definitely say Lost Boys. It's the one I've just watched the most. Didn't get to Santa Cruz when I was in LA, which is annoying. But yeah, the Lost Boys definitely.
My favourite vampire movie is probably one that people don't know too well. It's called Dracula 2000. It had a much younger, sexier version of Gerard Butler who played Dracula. And essentially the story is that Van Helsing, he captures Dracula, keeps him in a safe, underground safe, and throughout the centuries he injects himself with Dracula's blood, which keeps him not necessarily immortal, but it keeps him alive for longer than he should be living, so centuries. Obviously the downside to that is if he doesn't inject himself, he's no longer immortal, so to speak. And in that movie, as the years progress, he settles down, he has a child, and obviously because he's been injecting himself with Dracula's blood, he inevitably passes on Dracula's blood to his daughter. The story goes that there are a bunch of grave robbers, I think they were, and they break into the underground safe and they release Dracula, and Dracula, I guess he's dead, but he becomes alive, so to speak, and he, because Van Helsing's daughter has the blood of Dracula, he has this connection to her, and so the whole story follows that he goes to find another being just like himself. Not someone who is created, not someone who he's bitten and created, but someone who is born of his blood. And as the story progresses, obviously she denies his advances and they end up killing him. But what I found really interesting about that story, and they had a lot of biblical references, and you find out at the end that Dracula was actually Judas.
Interview with the Vampire, definitely, hands down, one of them. And the other one has to be Lost Boys. I have to pick between those two. You can't give me one. It's impossible.
Favourite vampire movie? It is, well, I've got a few actually. Immediately springs to mind is From Dawn Till Dusk. So I really like the kind of Tarantino, Rodriguez style. So I think that is just such a cool film. And of course, George Clooney, amazing. Yeah, and I just like the Western kind of dirty, gritty, nighttime vibe of that movie. Also, I'm such a big Twilight fan. So of course, the first Twilight, I remember when I was at uni, I was in all my lectures just reading the 4 Twilight books instead of concentrating on what I should have been, because I got so obsessed with it. So I remember when that first came out as well, I was so excited to see that.
The Queen of the Damned, and of course, From Dusk Till Dawn.
Favorite vampire movies? Okay, I would say Interview with a Vampire, because that sort of introduced me to the whole very decadent, luxurious kind of vampire. Blade is definitely the Blade trilogy is definitely one of my favourites, because yeah, I love Wesley Snipes and I can't wait till he comes for his comebacks, which is coming out soon, I think, because I saw some things online. So those would probably be my top favourites.
Ooh. In what sense? That would be my next question. Because I do know people drink other people's blood. Like, you have couples who kind of do that together. So you've got consenting individuals, hopefully. So people do drink each other's blood. Do actual vampires exist? Could be possible, but I don't think it's legal to find out by putting a stake through someone's heart to really verify that one. But look, you know, we live in a world where lots of strange and weird things happen, and that inspiration must come from somewhere. And if not, then the people who sit around and do the scripts and have had inspiration from old Hollywood and who started the whole, you know, genre obviously had some sort of dream or interaction or something, but it's just caught fire. Really has caught fire, so there must be some truth to it.
I don't see why not, to be honest. The world's different. The world's got lots of weird things. Just imagine all those things that are buried deep down in the ocean that we've never seen before. I don't see why we haven't seen a vampire yet, or we probably have. I don't see why they wouldn't exist.
I mean, I do think vampires exist, not in your typical kind of Hollywood teeth, hair sucks blood, that kind of thing. But when I was thinking about this question, I was looking back at different cultures and different sort of languages and art throughout history and throughout different cultures. And for example, you know, there's the concept of a succubi in parts of South America, where you know, beautiful woman who drinks the blood of or feeds off the energy or the life force of men. And then, you know, you move across parts of Asia and parts of Africa, where they talk about the jinn, or a genie that lives in a cave who grants wishes. But unlike your typical Hollywood genie, you know, these are nefarious genies that in exchange for granting your wishes, they feed off your life force until they finally kill you. And when you kind of look at metaphorically, when vampires drink blood, blood is sort of a metaphor of life force or life energy.
It's funny you say that, because people always thought of me as weird, but I've always said yes, and I do believe they do exist, or they have. I've always actually said that I want to go to Transylvania for a holiday, and I've seen documentaries on, I think it was YouTube or on the internet, on social media. They were posting actual video clips saying you can go to Transylvania and you can actually visit a castle, and I think Dracula may have lived there from years ago. And tourists go there and they can stay there, they pay accommodation where they can stay there and do documentaries and visit the rooms and where they had the dinner and everything. So if there's something still like that going, I would definitely love to go there and experience it all, because I personally believe it does exist and it always has, but it's just been hidden very, very quietly.
Well, I was convinced one time that I saw a vampire. I don't know if he was just dressed up, but I think I was on a train going to Paran Station. I got off at Paran Station, so did he. And he was just this guy, like really pale skin, and I was really sussing him out. I was like, is this makeup, or He just had really pale skin, but it looked so natural, and he had like kind of dark circles under his eyes and like really shiny, long, perfect fingernails. And he had like, he must have been dressed up. He had like a top hat on and like a fancy suit, but it looked really expensive. And I remember saying to my friend, I was like, that is a vampire, that's a vampire, 100%. And he was just like, no, he's like literally dressed up. And I was like, no. And I got off the train, and I remember just watching him walk off into the night, and he just strolled down the street so calmly. And I was just like, vampires are real. And I had this moment of like, it was so overwhelming. And I think he was like, he was looking at me, and I was just like, don't read my mind, don't read my mind.
Back in the old days, I love to think like Nosferatu kind of, Bram Stoker's Dracula. I'd love to think about that kind of vampire really existing in like a Van Helsing kind of world. I mean, probably no, I guess is the easy answer to that. But I definitely think that there's probably people in the world that really identify with that vampire culture, and in their mind, they are a vampire in real life. I don't think they're going around drinking human blood.
I believe they did, and possibly still do, and I'll explain why. So, historically, during the 17th to 18th century, in Eastern Europe, Transylvania, Romania, I believe they did exist over there, and then it spread to Germany and then England. And also back then, people were more superstitious with their beliefs. They had a lot of stories and myths and legends to tell. So yeah, I think if cannibals can exist until the present day, why can't vampires exist? You know, back then and now. I mean, human flesh isn't far from human blood. In comparison to the history of vampires in the present day, if I were living in the 17th and 18th century and I witnessed somebody attack another person and feed off their blood, I would immediately think that's a vampire. I'd scream for help. I would say set them on fire or execute them. But now in the present day, if I saw something like that, I'd say, okay, this person definitely has a mental health issue. They need a mental health assessment order. I need to call the police, and I need to call an ambulance to save the poor victim. So
I am quite open-minded, so I would never say never, and I think it's quite feasible. I think that like a lot of vampire stories, if you were a vampire, you'd probably want to, you know, be going under the radar and not sort of announcing yourself to the world. So I think it's quite possible. And I think there are quite a lot of energetic vampires out there in the world as well. So depending on what level of vampire we're speaking of, I think in terms of the broader sense of the term, energetic vampires, I think there's quite a few out there. And I think in terms of a more mystical kind of thing, I'm pretty sure they possibly could be, because they are people that have, you know, that live on prana, as in they've been blessed by gods, and, you know, they can sit there and they're over 100 years old and they just meditate and they can sustain themselves. They've been, you know, so there's all sorts of amazing things in this world. So I would not say, just because I haven't met one doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
It's the fantasy element, I feel. Reality can be compelling, but every time people look to movies, we want to escape that reality into something different. And I think what's interesting about vampires, they're often painted as the anti-hero, but people always recognize a little bit something about that anti-hero who has to do something out of necessity, and they think, actually, if I was in that position, maybe I would be forced to do that. And in every vampire arc, they're trying to do some good in a very difficult situation. And you can sort of, you know, like Blade, he doesn't have to actually do that if you think about it, and there's always an out that they can have, but they never pick the easy, they pick the hard. And I think that's why vampire genres, or any sort of fantasy genre, is so popular, because people just want to see themselves as the hero, even though they're in very difficult circumstances.
Because it's ever evolving, so you go from the very old Bram Stoker, as I mentioned, having that it's, you know, the master and servant, a day protector. And now you go to all the way to True Blood, where you have them trying to rediscover their humanity. So there's all these different aspects that you can have with vampires. So it's not a case of you always get the same kind of vampire. So you get the ones that are young and be vicious and do whatever they want. Then you'll get the older ones that are realising they're existing, so they'll just try and live with society if they have to be around them, or exist with society if they have to be around them. And you can buy that with vampires. You can't really do that with zombies. You can't, you had warm bodies when you had zombies trying to be human again. It doesn't really work, but you can do that with vampires.
I mean, I can only go off why I think it's popular, why I like it, is because I like to think that there are other there's this unknown world, this supernatural unknown out there, and obviously it's become very popular as of late because of TV shows and movies and things like that. It's such a cult niche area, and it's got such a massive following, but I think as people or as humans, we always want to think that there's something out there, there's something more out there, there's something supernatural, something sort of mythical or different out there, whether it be aliens, whether it be God, that we think there's something sort of bigger or greater or more powerful out there.
I personally think it's popular for many reasons. One, because it's got a very dark, bold, Gothic essence to it. Two, I think it's because it's been around a long time. So we're talking way before the 80s, maybe way before the 70s, who knows when. A lot of people are familiar with the term vampire or the word. They've watched a lot of movies, documentaries. For me personally, I think that anyone that loves horror or goth or darkness, they will just connect to the whole vampire thing. So if anyone were to ask that question, it has to be someone that can understand vampires or horror or Gothic. Someone that's not in that kind of mind space, that doesn't have that connection or instinct, they won't understand it. It's pointless explaining it to someone that won't even level with that. So
there is something obviously we're so obsessed with life and death, and the idea that you could live forever is appealing to everybody. And I think people like to ponder it. It's like, would you like to be a vampire? Wouldn't you? It's like such a tough question. But they're these people who exist in such a different way. I mean, you can only come out at night time. There's no daylight. It's so restricting. And imagine having to kill, just to stay alive. And there's so many moral dilemmas with that. But I think it's just the whole, they've been so heavily romanticised, and I think that's just so attractive and appealing to so many people. And I mean, I think Twilight really... I'll admit I was a huge Twilight fan. That wasn't exactly my entry into vampires, but I did get really involved in that. I was reading all the novels and watching all the movies, and that I think it really made it popular.
I think it's just so romantic. I think it's this kind of, I guess everyone sort of loves a bad girl or a bad boy, and I think anything at nighttime is kind of more sexy than daytime activities. So I think it's just that romantification, if that's a word, of these creatures that are supposed to be super evil, but most of the time they're super good looking, they're really charming, charismatic, they've got this kind of hidden mystery about them. And I think people just love solving mysteries, and vampires, I think, are forever going to be a little mystery that you just can't solve, because, I guess we don't walk amongst vampires all the time. So it's this always little unknown, what are they? They're so mysterious and cool. Same as, I guess, for me, unicorns or mermaids. It's whoa, they're so beautiful and amazing.
It has a long history of vampires existing, and it's been in the movies so many times and things like that. So there's stories, there's books, there's movies based on vampires. It's probably never going to end.
Well, I think any kind of fantasy about vampires, as we're speaking about, is because a lot of the times, especially in today's world, it's getting into this, we've got all these issues in the world, and sometimes it's just very nice to escape from reality. So the fantasy of being able to escape from reality, to have, eternal life, to escape from the mundane world, I think that is very enticing to a lot of people.
Immortality, absolutely. You get to live forever. And I think there's something to be said to see, this is really interesting. So I was talking to one of my older friends, he's 80, bless, and he's actually my relative, uncle. Why didn't I say that? It's very difficult in African societies. Is everyone's an uncle, but kind of, but not really. Anyway, I digress. And he was kind of telling me about the time where you didn't do anything but use a fax machine, or you only had a Nokia, or you didn't have the internet. So he's seen these stages come through, and he's been alive for all these stages. He can talk about the war. And vampires have that insight because they can, you know, hopefully when you get bitten, it was a long time ago, so you can go from black and white TV screens, the capes and the white crisp shirt to, you know, more risque Aaliyah type outfits to more modern takes with the leather. So I like the aspect of looking through, being part of history and not just looking back on it. So, and there's a lot you can do in this life. Like I want to do a lot in my life, and I, you know, maybe, you know, God willing, I get, what, 70, 80, 90, 100 years. I'd like to be in full health for that, which is unlikely because your health declines, but they don't get that. You're forever young. Hopefully when you get bitten, everything is great because you can't change, but you get to see the full scope of history and experience it, and then you have to morph to suit the time. And I like that. I like that.
Yes, I would. I don't see why not. I don't know, I think it would be fun. I think it'd get boring after a while, but I don't see why not. Have a bit of fun.
I mean, there would be downsides, obviously. I wouldn't want to kill or want to drink my family or my friend's blood. The immortality would be great. Having amazing, flawless skin would be great too. Having extra speed and strength would also be great. But in the same way that, for example, I see the humanism in Lestat, I also feel that maybe becoming a vampire isn't everything it's cracked up to be. So, I mean, I don't really know how to, I don't know whether to say yes or no to that question.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I know that's going to sound really weird to a lot of people. I don't think of it as a bad thing at all. If you actually watch a lot of vampire movies, a lot of them have a beautiful story behind how they were transformed and what happened. And some of them are very horrific, obviously, and very, you know, dark and scary, but most of them have a very beautiful story behind it. And a lot of people don't see that. They just look at, oh, it's scary, it's blood, it's this, it's that, but they don't look behind the art. They don't look behind past that and see why it happened, how it happened, and how they've become the way they are, and that they actually still feel things. And if you watch Interview with the Vampire, even though Brad Pitt is a vampire, but he's feeling a lot of emotion from the humanity side, and Lestat picked that up. He picked that up, and that's why he said, "You're so beautiful" to Brad Pitt, because he's very unique, he's very different. Yes, he's converted into a vampire. Yes, he's got the teeth and the eyes, and he goes out of the night and he, you know, feeds and whatnot, but he still has a very humanity side, so he feels for humans. He sympathises for them. To me, that's a beautiful thing, because he's got that bit of warmness to him, you know.
I've thought about that so much, probably. I think my answer's always been yes. But then there's so much to it. It would be so lonely. I think the idea of eternity, but in this current world that we live in, I don't know how much longer it's going to go on for anyway. Could end in 50 years, honestly, with the way that things are going. So it might be fun. I think the main issue for me would be killing people. I'd be a bit like Louis from Interview with the Vampire, I think. Merciful death, how you love your precious guilt. I don't know if I would be able to handle it. And then companionship would be so difficult to find. I mean, that's what happens in all the vampire movies. It's you love somebody, do you turn them? I don't know if I could. I don't think I would. I'd be a bit like Edward. I'd be a bit, I don't want to turn you, Bella. But no, I think I would definitely love to be a vampire. It would just give you time, like time to do everything. You know, all these vampires are so rich, you can just accumulate your wealth. I could spend all my time writing and not feeling like time's wasting. So I think I'm definitely suited to it. So if there are any vampires watching, then, you know, feel free.
Absolutely. I think that would be so cool. Like for me, I get really scared of dying, and I just find it terrifying to think, oh my God, I'm gonna die one day. And if I could live forever, and it would just be a little bit painful in that stage where I think you'd like have 3 days of turning into a vampire, I think I would go for it. That would be so cool. As long as I would be able to turn or sire other people into vampires as well.
Yes. Well, I mean, I was able to be a vampire in Vampire Hooker Hotel, and I enjoyed every bit of it. So maybe. I mean, I'd live forever. I'd stay beautiful and youthful, and all I need to do is feed off human blood. And
Of course. Is that even? To be able to exist forever and see the rise and fall of civilizations, to come into the world when you please, and then to go to sleep in your crypt for 100 years, you know, for 500 years, and go, oh, I don't like this world at the moment, and then to rise again when you go, oh my God, the culture and the civilization is amazing, I want to come and experience that. And then also, because there is so much corruption and greed in this world at the moment, to be outside of the human world and be able to come in and just go, I don't like what you're doing to these people. I'm just at night, just imagine, for example, some really conceited leader that is, you know, bullying the most vulnerable people in our society. Just imagine if we woke up tomorrow morning and we just go, oh my God, the so-called current leader of the country is drained of blood and he's dead. Oh my God, what are we going to do? So yeah, all these little things, I think it would be amazing.
I love it. I love it. I'm one of those more, I'd say more conservative. Do you love the old Hollywood look? The male vampires with the very, you know, suave, crisp, slicked back hair, very, you know, very proper. You know, little blood, B negative gets on your chin and you just wipe it nicely. Like that. So, you know, and then there's the more, like I said, Aaliyah, that outfit is just like, yeah, those are gym goals. Every person who's ever had a goal, I'm sure they have like a picture of her in that outfit and go, next Halloween, that's the one. So I like the fact that it changes, but you can also see that it goes with the time, and I love that. They can't afford to look like they did in 1931, in 2019, and that can still be appropriate. So they're good at, you know, going with the times, but also keeping an edge. They're fashionistas, kind of. Blood-sucking fashionistas.
I actually quite like it. As you can tell, I'm starting to get into it. Guessing you were seeing photos of me years ago that I couldn't wear stuff like this years ago, so now I'm actually finally embracing it. I don't care what people think, I'm gonna wear whatever I want. I actually do like their wardrobe. Many websites I'm going to, I'm trying to get a vampire wardrobe going, so I quite like it.
I mean, I'm all for capes. I think fashion changes, doesn't it? So, yeah, whatever's in at the time, I'm more than happy to go with.
Amazing, fantastic, immaculate. I can't even think of any other words. Well, my clothing is, yeah, it's very kind of similar. I love all their clothing. The long coats they wear, the top hats, the fleece shirts, the boots, the sticks, everything about them. It's very, very medieval, Victorian, Gothic, horror, rock even, a bit of everything. It's got flavours and different styles from a lot of things all mixed. And you can't go wrong, because if you look at Queen of the Damned, you've got leather, then you've got shirts. Then you've got, you know, Into the Vampire, it's more long fleece with the corsets. Then you've got Celine Underworld, and it's more body tight. you know, the wet look. So it's all different. Every movie has got a different essence and vibe with the fashion and the clothing, but that's the best part of it because you can incorporate everything and you can still pull it off.
Oh, a vampire's wardrobe. I think it's great. Yeah, I've gotten a lot of comments because I usually, I dress differently for different occasions, but sometimes I'm, you know, lace. I've definitely been influenced by all the media I've consumed, but I've had someone come up to me and say, I don't remember what obscure reference they made because I don't even think I'd seen the Addams Family at this point, but they were making a joke about me being Morticia Addams. They were trying to be a little bit rude, but I get that a lot. I think it's great though. I remember the line from The Queen of the Damned when Lestat said to Marius, how did you make it through the, what do you say? How did you slip through the 80s in red velvet? I think it's so interesting because it's like their fashion doesn't change, but it's always so timeless. And yeah, they're, I mean, Lestat takes care of the way that he dresses.
Oh, I think it could be whatever. Like, it could be a little bit fruity if they wanted it to be, or it could be the dark, mysterious cape-wearing vampire. But I like the kind of modern-day vampire, like in Blade or something, where they're all very cool, like everything black, fitted, looking like bang on point, like they've been styled by some amazing designer or something. I love that. And like the Ray-Ban Sunnies, that classic Edward Cullen moment in the first Twilight movie. Like I really like that kind of, yeah, bad boy, bad girl kind of look.
There's been various types. You get the beautiful, stunning looking vampire, you get the handsome ones, and then you get the really ugly devil looking ones. So it really depends, but I prefer the ones that look strikingly attractive on the exterior and then on the inside reveals the ugly, the extreme ugliness of who they really are beneath.
Oh, I love it. I just love it. Back to the different types of vampires. So things like Interview with a Vampire, they are just so decadent and luxurious. Oh, wow, like, you know, all the really old school velvets and frills. Oh, I love it. Things like Blade, where they're just so slick and just suave and just everything is so stylized. I love that as well. If you go to the other sort of vampires, the more, I guess, the more zombie sort of vampires, where they're controlled by a greater vampire leader, probably not so, because they're sort of borderline zombie and they kind of got bits falling off and, you know, it's not a very nice look. Yeah, so, but the better vampires, oh, definitely, yeah.
Oh, that's a personal question. Honestly, yes. For most people, I would say, because it's just fantasy again. It's in the realm of what's possible, but not in reality. So I think there's a lot to be said, and you might go into, you see some very interesting costumes that kind of look like they could pass for vampire costumes too, can't they? So, yeah.
Yes, they say, who would be the vampire for me? I'd go for True Blood. I'd probably say Eric Northman. I've got a cushion of him, so yeah. Eric Northman definitely for me.
Yeah, I think they are. Again, I think it's this whole popularity that they have, that they're these mythical, larger than life, you know, not human creatures. They come with so much mystery and awe, and they ooze sex appeal. So I think, yeah, they are a turn on.
I don't know if it's their presence or like an essence about them, but it's like, you know, when someone walks in the room and then when they leave, their essence is still lingering. That's what a vampire does. So when they leave, you still feel them around you, alluring. It's like they're in the air or something, you know? And it doesn't matter what movie it is, doesn't matter which actor played the character, there's something about each vampire character that does that to you. And it's like they suck you in. It's like they cast you under their spell. I don't know, they've got a very sweet and romantic side to them, but it's very dark, very deep and dark, and they're very romantic, but they're shot in a very different way. People, again, don't see that. They kind of just look at, oh, he's going to bite me and he's vicious. You got to look beyond that, you know, and if you watch movies very carefully and you study that, you'll see that side to them.
I haven't been dressed up as a Kashi yet. I don't know why I haven't done that. That's next Halloween, I think. But she's definitely a turn on, I'd say. Tom Cruise as Lestat, I loved that. Edward from Twilight, yeah, I don't know about Michael, definitely a turn on. There's something about, I mean, people are into blood, you know what I mean? That's like a big thing. And I mean, that probably ties in some way. I'm not gonna comment on my own personal kinks in this video. That would be bad. I have a habit of like oversharing in interviews. It's really bad. I'm gonna get myself into so much trouble, but I mean.
Oh, I mean, for me, probably not so much, but I know like my cousin, she's obsessed with vampires. And I remember when, I can't remember which one, I think it was Twilight actually, when she first read that, she said to her partner, can you read this and be like this person? Because like, I love him. So I think people, again, it's that mystery, cool, kind of dark, dangerous type that I think people get super turned on by. And I think also like only, you know, walking the nighttime kind of is very attractive as well for some people.
Yes. Well, I believe so, especially if they're attractive, yeah. Especially if they're sexy in the film. It's a turn on because you just reminded me of that scene where Aaliyah's making love with her lover and she bites his nipple and he starts bleeding and he finds it a turn on and they start making love. To me, that's kinky.
For me personally, blood is always, I have a very strong bloodlust, so blood is always a turn on. So whether it's seeing, you know, that a vampire drinking someone's blood in a sensual way or just seeing someone getting ripped to shreds and just blood splattering everywhere, I always find that, you know, it gets the blood flowing and there's this sense of excitement about it. So I think that's also another big point as to why they are so popular.
You know what, I think it was this Halloween and it was probably one of my favorite costumes. I went to a party and I thought, oh, what should I wear? And I kind of did the boring thing and I wanted to do something more extreme, but went to the party and there was this one guy who was super tall and I don't know how they do it, but he had his head in his hands as if like he'd been decapitated by a vampire with these blood spots and all this sort of thing, but then the vampire was headless, so I don't know how that is, but I thought that was really cool. That was my most recent encounter.
I mean, the only story that comes to mind is I remember I was at this a couple of years ago, I was at a Halloween party. It was on a boat cruise sort of party thing, and I was there with my girlfriends. We were all dressed up in different things. So one friend was a vampire bride. I was dressed up as this weird vampire devil woman thing. The other friend, she was dressed up as Maleficent. So there are all these different characters that we dressed up as, and we were at this Halloween party. And I mean, that's as far as the vampire story goes, but I just remember there was a group of guys that they were there and they were all drunk and they'd all sort of decided to use the same pickup line. So, you know, one guy comes over to my friend and goes, girl, your feet must be tired. You've been running through my mind all day long. And it was like, oh, very funny, that's great. The second one came along and he's like, you've been running through my mind. Damn it. And he just walked off. So, I mean, that's as far as the story goes, but we were dressed as vampires, I guess.
I remember when I was little, they were shooting Queen of the Damned. It came from America into Australia, and you know, look, we've got Dockland Studios down here. We've got so many places where they shoot movies, and this one was filmed in my area in St Albans, and it was at a factory that they were shooting about 10 minutes up the road. And I remember I was probably 13, 14, I was in high school and I was young, I was probably in year 7 or year 8, and I had a few friends in high school in year 12 and they were wearing a lot of jumpers saying Queen of the Damned cast and crew with the hoodies, and they had their hands in the pocket, and I'm looking at them. And then I had a family friend that my dad knows, and he said, you know, you should go, you know, audition for it. They're looking for plenty of goths and vampires as extras, and you know, I know all the people on set, this, that, and I was really young. So I was just getting into the whole Buffy and Angel being on TV, and I was all fascinated with it, you know. And anyway, I applied for it, even though my dad's friend knew someone, and there was a lot of offers going, and I had makeup done quickly at home. Mum took a few photos. I've actually got a few things that I brought along. I kept the article as well. I remember the newspaper coming out, and it was a local newspaper, and I had to keep the article. It was just very sacred. And from that day till now, I've still got that article, and I've still got a lot of photos that I kept.
My parents were actually on set of the Queen of the Damned movie as well. I think before I was born, right? I was born 99. That was before I was born. And they were in the crowd at the concert that they had, and I think everyone got the call and they were told to dress up, you know, a bit vampiric and like goth. And so my parents were there and they were doing a shot, and my dad was in the background of this shot. I remember my mum told me this. And he had like white face makeup on and stuff, and they told him to get out of the shot because he looked too much like one of the main characters and he was like interrupting the shot. They were like, you have to move because you're like distracting. So yeah, they had to get out of the shot. But yeah, I think that's so cool that my parents were there. I was getting my nose pierced by this guy and he was like really cool looking. And he asked me about my name. He was probably one of the first people to ask me about my name, because not a lot of people like get where it's from. People are like, what is that? And yeah, he was like, oh, I was on set of that movie. And I was like, oh, you know, my parents were. He's like, you must have had really cool parents. I'm like, yeah, they were so much cooler than me.
No, I was thinking I've got a really uncool vampire story to tell. And that is when I was in grade 1 and my brother was in preschool, we got to choose what we wanted to dress up as. And he chose a lady beetle, very cute, and I chose a vampire. And we were this little trio. My mum made our costumes. She's very creative, so she made us these cute little costumes. So he was this cute little lady beetle and I was this like the most blonde, piggy-tailed, unscary vampire ever. And I was just thought, I look back at the photos and just think, what a nerd. Like, that is the least threatening vampire ever.
I think there's more to be explored. I don't think that genre is complete and it's done. Like I said, it's just with the ages, and I hope to see more of that genre on screen. Yeah, it's popular, you know, and I think one thing, for example, Twilight has managed to do is tap into that sort of young market and make it more marketable, but there's also room for the old classics, I find, and not to forget that, like I said, Blade and Aaliyah, people have done it before, and these are actually superheroes, and they're not, they might not wear the Superman cape and they might not be all good, but there is some good that they're trying to achieve, and unpacking those stories is important, and to keep that going, I'm excited for that, because, you know, vampires have broken barriers before. I
think the craze or the interest in vampires is, like I said, very niche. I think you see it a lot more in the younger generation. They seem to be sort of swayed by movies, TV shows, Hollywood. You get these very good-looking guys that play vampires, and they tell these amazing stories. And I think when you're sort of, not saying that you don't when you're older, but when you're sort of younger, you always question who you are, your existence, your place in the world. And so when you see these larger-than-life creatures, you kind of think, you know, it'd be so great to aspire to be like that, to kind of have a purpose, have a strength or something in the world and not feel so lost and confused. And then when you sort of speak to the older generation, for example, you would have talked to my mum. She sees me watch vampire movies, werewolves, things like Underworld and all that kind of stuff, and she's like, I don't understand. I don't get why you find this so interesting. It's just blood and gore, and it's the same story. They go and kill humans. Why do you find that interesting? But I think more so as a younger person, I kind of relate in that respect, is that that's what interests me about it, and I can see why it has so much popularity, is because there are these creatures that are so amazing and mysterious and so larger than life that you kind of go, wow, you know, really aspire to be like that, because it takes away from your own sort of mundane human existence, so to speak.
If I'm going to say anything to the audience, is to, if you don't know what a vampire is, or you don't know who Dracula is, or you're scared of them or anything like that, don't be. if anything, they're nothing to be scared of. You have to watch one of their movies, or you have to watch a movie and really understand what they're all about. They're not as bad as you think they are. If anything, I feel personally, I'm more scared of humans. I really am. I'm more scared of humans than them, because humans do so much damage, and the way the world is going, it's in turmoil at the moment. Humanity is just going upside down. So I really don't have anything bad to say about them, but they all are just incredible. You know, every movie, every actor that's portrayed them, they've all done it in a beautiful, flowing way. So they really, really appeal to me. If anyone out there in the audience is a vampire fan like myself, they will understand where I'm coming from. If not, and they're not really into them, or they don't find them fascinating, that's fine, but at least give it a shot to watch one of their movies, or understand the actor and what they've gone through to get into that character, because it's mind-blowing, it's amazing.
I would love to see a vampire movie that just is totally different to any other vampire movie. Like, I mean, I know they can't walk in the daytime and things, but I think it would be cool if there was this like super powered vampire that could like have this magic elixir to make it walk amongst like day walkers. And it was just this like super scary, I guess like the zombies that aren't just kind of like, these vampires that are kind of transgress our normal ideas of what a vampire would be.
Yeah, like bring back the vampires, hey, you know, because I think everything goes through little phases. So we did have a lot of vampire movies, say back in the 90s, you know, with like The Interview and Blade, and then we started getting all the Twilights and a bit more. So I personally like the more stylish and, you know, very grand sort of characters. So I think sort of bring that back, because I think for the last little while we've been getting a lot of zombie movies. And I mean, zombies are cool, they're fun because they're sort of undead and they just keep going, and there's that sense of you know, that's fear that people are running away from. But I think it's good to be able, maybe, you know, to start bringing back that vampire genre, but in a much more lavish kind of way, and, you know, maybe mix it with the zombies, you know, bring back those, you know, being able to control, and maybe like the Night King, but, you know, sort of character, but vampire. So yeah.